Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Theoretical approaches to intersectionality in discourse analysis. Intersectionality in discourse analysis offers a profound theoretical approach for examining the complexities of identity and how various forms of oppression interact within communicative practices. Drawing from post-structuralism, critical race theory, feminist theory, Marxist theory, and post-colonial theory, this approach illuminates the nuanced ways in which language not only reflects but actively constructs social realities. By integrating these diverse theoretical perspectives, discourse analysis under an intersectional lens can critically assess how identities are shaped, performed, and contested within various texts and spoken interactions. 1. Post-structuralism. Post-structuralism offers a unique lens for examining intersectionality in discourse analysis by focusing on the construction and deconstruction of identities through language. This approach is grounded in the belief that language is not just a tool for communication but a powerful medium through which social structures and identities are both created and questioned. 1. Key concepts of post-structuralism in discourse analysis. Point 1. Language as a site of power. Post-structuralist theory posits that language is deeply embedded with power dynamics. It is not merely reflective of reality, rather, it shapes and constructs the reality we understand. In the context of intersectionality, this perspective is crucial as it examines how language constructs identities such as race, gender, and class, and how these constructions uphold or challenge power structures. Point 2. Discursive construction of identity. According to post-structuralism, identities are not fixed or inherent but are continually being produced and altered through discourse. Each act of communication can reinforce or destabilize established norms about identity. For example, the way media discourse constructs femininity or ethnicity can be analyzed to see how these identities are not only portrayed but shaped and reshaped in society. Point 3. Deconstruction. A central aspect of post-structuralism is deconstruction, a method of critically analyzing texts to uncover assumptions and contradictions that may not be immediately apparent. In applying deconstruction to intersectional analysis, researchers can reveal how language simultaneously constructs and obscures complex identity intersections, such as how racial and gender identities intersect in public policy debates or media representations. 2. Applying post-structuralism to intersectional analysis in discourse. Case study application. Consider a discourse analysis of political speeches using a post-structuralist and intersectional lens. A researcher might examine how a politician's rhetoric constructs notions of citizenship and belonging, paying special attention to how these constructions intersect with race, gender, and class. Through deconstructive analysis, the researcher could uncover underlying biases or contradictions in the speech, revealing how certain groups are marginalized while others are privileged. Methodological considerations. Text selection. Choosing a diverse range of texts that represent various identity intersections to fully explore the complexities of social categorizations. Analytical focus. Concentrating on the language used to describe different groups, noting any patterns that suggest underlying normative assumptions or power imbalances. Interpretive framework. Utilizing theories from both intersectionality and post-structuralism to interpret findings, ensuring a nuanced understanding of how identities are constructed and intersect in discourse. Integrating post-structuralism with intersectionality in discourse analysis offers profound insights into how identities are not merely expressed but actively constructed through language. This approach allows for a more nuanced critique of how societal norms and power relations are embedded within discourse, providing a richer understanding of the dynamics at play in shaping human interaction and social structures. By focusing on the fluid and dynamic nature of identity construction, post-structuralist intersectional analysis challenges conventional understandings and prompts a re-evaluation of how we perceive and engage with the complex layers of identity in discourse. 2. Critical race theory, CRT. Critical race theory, CRT, is a vital theoretical framework that examines how racism is embedded within the fabric of society's structures, including legal, economic, and educational systems. When applied to discourse analysis, CRT provides a powerful lens for understanding how racial identities are constructed, perceived, and intersect with other identity markers through language and communication. 1. Key concepts of CRT in discourse analysis. Point 1. Centrality of race and racism. CRT posits that race and racism are central, enduring, and deeply ingrained in society. In discourse analysis, this perspective seeks to uncover how racial assumptions influence communication in both overt and covert ways. It involves analyzing how racialized language impacts the representation and treatment of individuals in media, literature, politics, and everyday conversations. Point 2. Interest convergence. Derek Bell, a founding figure of CRT, introduced the idea of interest convergence, which suggests that racial justice or progress only occurs when it converges with the interests of white people. In discourse analysis, this concept can be used to examine how racial progress is discussed or framed in ways that might also align with, or be co-opted by, dominant group interests. Point 3. Intersectionality. As a concept that originated within CRT, intersectionality is fundamental. It highlights how race intersects with other identities like gender, class, sexuality, and disability, leading to complex layers of oppression. In discourse analysis, this means looking at how these intersections are communicated in texts and how they influence the social and cultural narratives about identity and belonging. 2. Applying CRT to intersectional analysis in discourse. Case study application. An analysis of media coverage on police brutality might employ CRT to explore how the intersections of race and gender shape public discourse. For instance, the portrayal of black men and women in such contexts can reveal different narratives that intersect with societal stereotypes and prejudices, affecting public perception and policy responses. Methodological considerations. Narrative analysis. Focusing on the stories told about race and its intersections with other identities in various media forms to understand the underlying messages and their societal impacts. Contextualization. Placing discourse in historical and sociopolitical context to better understand how and why certain racial narratives are promoted or silenced. Counter-narrative. An essential method in CRT, using counter-narrative to give voice to the marginalized experiences that are often left out of mainstream discourse, thereby challenging dominant narratives. By integrating critical race theory with intersectionality in discourse analysis, researchers can more effectively identify and challenge the ways in which race and racism permeate language and shape societal perceptions and interactions. This approach not only deepens the understanding of racial dynamics but also illuminates the complex interplay of various identity markers within discourse. CRT's focus on systemic inequality and the embeddedness of racism provides a critical framework for dissecting the power structures that maintain racial hierarchies and influence the construction of identity in society. 3. Feminist theory. Feminist theory in discourse analysis is instrumental in examining how gender is both represented and constructed through language. It delves into the experiences and voices of women, scrutinizing how these aspects intersect with other identities such as race, class, and sexuality, thereby offering a multidimensional understanding of power dynamics and social inequality. 1. Key concepts of feminist theory in discourse analysis. 1. Gender as a social construct. Feminist theory asserts that gender is not a natural or fixed category but is socially constructed and performed. This perspective is crucial in discourse analysis as it allows researchers to explore how gender identities are created and maintained through language in media, literature, politics, and everyday interactions. Point 2. Patriarchy and power. A central concern of feminist discourse analysis is the way language perpetuates patriarchal values. Analyzing texts and spoken language through this lens helps uncover how discourse practices contribute to sustaining male dominance and marginalizing women and other gender identities. Point 3. The personal is political. This slogan from second-wave feminism underscores the idea that personal experiences are deeply entwined with larger social and political contexts. In discourse analysis, this means that discussions of personal or private matters can be critically examined for their broader socio-political implications, particularly how they reflect and reinforce gender norms and inequalities. 2. Applying feminist theory to intersectional analysis in discourse. Case study application. An analysis of healthcare discourse could utilize feminist and intersectional lenses to examine how medical narratives about women's health are shaped by intersecting identities. For instance, how are the health concerns of women of different races and classes discussed in medical literature and public health campaigns? This approach would highlight disparities and biases in how knowledge about women's health is constructed and communicated. Methodological considerations. Lexical choices. Paying close attention to the choice of words and terminology that reflect gender perceptions and biases. For example, how are terms like hysterical used in relation to women as opposed to men in clinical settings? Representation analysis. Examining who gets to speak in media or public forums and whose voices are heard or sidelined, considering the intersection of gender with other identities. Thematic analysis. Identifying themes that recurrently arise in discourse about gender and intersecting identities, such as autonomy, victimization, or empowerment. Feminist theory enriches intersectional discourse analysis by not only focusing on gender but also by highlighting how it interplays with other critical identities like race, class, and sexuality. This approach challenges the normative discourses that often marginalize or misrepresent non-dominant genders and identities. By analyzing how gender is constructed through language and how these constructions serve to uphold or challenge power structures, feminist theory provides profound insights into the mechanisms of power and resistance within society. This theoretical framework advocates for a more equitable representation and treatment of all genders, particularly within discourse, fostering a more inclusive and critically aware societal perspective. 4. Marxist theory. Marxist theory offers a critical framework for understanding how economic and class issues are intricately linked to language and discourse. It emphasizes the role of material conditions and economic relations in shaping identities, power dynamics, and social interactions. When combined with intersectionality, Marxist analysis in discourse studies explores how these economic factors intersect with other social identities like race, gender, and sexuality. 1. Key concepts of Marxist theory in discourse analysis. Point 1. Materialism and economic determinism. At the core of Marxist theory is the belief that material and economic conditions determine social structures and human behavior. In discourse analysis, this perspective is used to examine how economic status and class relations influence the way language is used and the kinds of identities and ideas that are promoted or marginalized within various texts and communications. Point 2. Ideology and hegemony. Marxist analysis often involves the study of ideology, the set of beliefs and values that justify the interests of dominant groups in society. Through discourse, ideology is both reproduced and challenged. Hegemony, a concept developed by Antonio Gramsci, extends this idea to explain how consent to the status quo is achieved culturally and ideologically. In terms of intersectionality, examining how ideologies about race, gender, and class are interwoven can reveal the subtle ways in which language maintains or disrupts existing power structures. Point 3. Class struggle and consciousness. This aspect of Marxist theory looks at how class struggle is reflected and expressed in discourse. It explores the language of resistance and opposition as well as how class consciousness, an awareness of one's class position and its political implications, is articulated. Intersectionality enriches this analysis by showing how class intersects with other identities, affecting how individuals and groups experience and resist oppression. 2. Applying Marxist theory to intersectional analysis in discourse. Case study application. An analysis of workplace discourse using a Marxist and intersectional lens could focus on how corporate communications reinforce class distinctions while intersecting with gender and racial identities. For instance, examining the language used in corporate diversity statements or employment policies can reveal how economic relations and workplace hierarchies are rhetorically managed and maintained. Methodological considerations. Discourse and power relations. Focusing on how language in various social contexts, like media, politics, or corporate environments, supports or challenges existing economic and social hierarchies. Economic contexts. considering the economic contexts that influence discourse, such as the impacts of globalization on local communities or the economic factors driving immigration narratives. Critical content analysis. Employing content analysis to critically evaluate how texts construct and convey messages about class, labor, and economics, and how these messages intersect with other identity markers. Marxist theory, when applied alongside intersectionality in discourse analysis, provides a potent framework for dissecting the interconnections between economic conditions, class structures, and other forms of identity. This approach not only highlights how material realities shape discourse but also how discourse itself can reinforce or challenge economic inequalities. By examining how class intersects with other social categories, Marxist intersectional analysis offers deep insights into the comprehensive and often complex landscape of social power and identity as reflected and constituted through language. This enriches our understanding of the socioeconomic forces at play in shaping human experiences and social relations. 5. Postcolonial theory. Postcolonial theory provides a critical framework for understanding the enduring impacts of colonization on identity, culture, and discourse. It examines how the histories and legacies of colonial power continue to shape present-day social structures, interactions, and ideologies, particularly focusing on issues of race, ethnicity, and cultural identity. When integrated with intersectionality, postcolonial theory in discourse analysis explores how these colonial legacies intersect with other axes of identity such as gender, class, and sexuality. 1. Key concepts of postcolonial theory in discourse analysis. Point 1. Colonial discourse and power. Postcolonial theory scrutinizes how colonialism has embedded itself in language and thought, influencing not only the way colonized societies are viewed but also how they view themselves. In discourse analysis, this involves studying how colonial narratives and stereotypes continue to permeate media representations, educational content, and political rhetoric, often reinforcing a Eurocentric worldview. Point 2. Hybridity and third space. Concepts like hybridity and third space, introduced by theorists such as Homi K. Bhabha, highlight the complex identity formations that emerge in postcolonial contexts. These concepts focus on the intermingling of colonizer and colonized cultures, creating new, hybrid identities. In discourse analysis, examining these hybrid identities can reveal how language reflects and negotiates complex cultural intersections and resistances. Point 3. Subaltern voices. The concept of the subaltern, from Gayatri Spivak, addresses how certain groups are marginalized and rendered voiceless in dominant historical and cultural narratives. Postcolonial discourse analysis aims to recover these voices, analyzing how they articulate their identities and histories in contrast to dominant narratives. This is particularly significant when these analyses consider how gender, race, and other identities intersect in the experiences of the subaltern. 2. Applying postcolonial theory to intersectional analysis in discourse. Case study application. Analyzing media representations of postcolonial nations in contemporary news can benefit from a postcolonial and intersectional perspective. For instance, how are nations like India or Nigeria portrayed in Western media, and how do these portrayals intersect with racial, ethnic, and cultural stereotypes? This analysis could uncover how colonial legacies influence current perceptions and discourses about these countries and their peoples. Methodological considerations. Contextual analysis. Focusing on the historical and cultural contexts that shape discourse, acknowledging the colonial pasts that inform present language use and public discourse. Representation studies. Examining how different media forms portray postcolonial subjects and the extent to which these representations perpetuate colonial attitudes or subvert them through the articulation of hybrid or third space identities. Intersectional focus. Paying close attention to how colonial legacies impact various identity markers differently, uncovering layers of oppression and resistance within the discourse. Postcolonial theory, especially when combined with intersectional analysis, enriches discourse studies by bringing to light the pervasive impact of colonial histories on contemporary identities and discourses. It challenges the Eurocentric bias that often underlies mainstream representations and interpretations of the world. By focusing on the interplay between colonial power dynamics and multiple axes of identity, Postcolonial intersectional analysis provides deeper insights into the complexities of global cultural interactions and power relations, helping to foster a more nuanced and equitable understanding of postcolonial realities. This theoretical approach advocates for a critical examination of both historical influences and ongoing inequalities as they are expressed and perpetuated through language. Conclusion. The theoretical approaches to intersectionality in discourse analysis provide a rich tapestry of methodologies and insights that enhance our understanding of the interplay between language, identity, and power. Whether through the lens of poststructuralism's focus on language and power, CRT's emphasis on race and systemic injustice, feminist theory's critique of gender norms, Marxist analysis of class dynamics, or postcolonial scrutiny of historical influences, these perspectives collectively enrich our analytical frameworks. They enable a more comprehensive exploration of how discourses shape and are shaped by complex social identities and structures. This integration of diverse theories not only broadens the scope of discourse analysis but also deepens its impact, fostering a more nuanced and critical examination of the ways in which societal inequalities are perpetuated and challenged through language. Frequently asked questions. What is intersectionality in discourse analysis? Intersectionality in discourse analysis is a framework that examines how overlapping social identities, such as race, gender, class, and sexuality, and systemic inequalities are reflected and constructed through language and communication. It helps reveal how various forms of identity and power intersect in discourses across different texts and settings. How does poststructuralism contribute to intersectionality in discourse analysis? Poststructuralism contributes to intersectionality by emphasizing that identities are constructed through discourse and are fluid rather than fixed. This approach highlights how language shapes perceptions of identity and power, thereby influencing social relations and cultural norms. What are the key concepts of critical race theory, CRT, in discourse analysis? CRT in discourse analysis focuses on how race and racism permeate language and affect social structures. Key concepts include the centrality of race and racism, interest convergence, the idea that racial justice advances when it aligns with the interests of dominant groups, and intersectionality, which examines how race intersects with other identities. How does feminist theory apply to intersectionality in discourse analysis? Feminist theory in discourse analysis investigates how gender-related issues are constructed in language and how they intersect with other identities. It challenges the traditional patriarchal narratives and highlights the importance of gender as a social construct that influences and is influenced by other identity markers. What role does Marxist theory play in intersectional discourse analysis? Marxist theory brings attention to the influence of economic conditions and class structures on discourse. It explores how economic relations shape identities and power dynamics within language, focusing on how material conditions and class struggle are reflected and perpetuated through discourse. What does postcolonial theory add to the understanding of intersectionality in discourse analysis? Postcolonial theory examines how the legacies of colonialism continue to impact identity and power dynamics within discourse. It explores how historical colonial influences shape current discourses around race, ethnicity, and cultural identity, and how these intersect with other social identities. How are different theoretical frameworks used to analyze intersectionality in media? Different theoretical frameworks analyze intersectionality in media by highlighting how various media portrayals can reinforce or challenge societal norms related to identity and power. For example, feminist theory might analyze gender representation, while CRT could focus on racial dynamics in media content. What methodological tools are commonly used in intersectional discourse analysis? Common methodological tools include critical discourse analysis, CDA, ethnographic methods, narrative analysis, and content analysis. These tools help dissect how language constructs and communicates intersecting identities and power structures. How can intersectional discourse analysis influence policy making? Intersectional discourse analysis can uncover biases and inequalities embedded in policy language and rhetoric. By highlighting how policies differently affect various social groups, this analysis can inform more equitable and inclusive policy development. Why is it important to consider intersectionality in discourse analysis? Considering intersectionality in discourse analysis is crucial because it provides a more comprehensive understanding of how multiple forms of identity and systemic inequalities interact within language. This approach helps reveal deeper insights into the complexities of social issues, promoting a more nuanced and effective approach to addressing discrimination and inequality.